So we'll be looking at Jira, and we'll be seeing how we can use Jira to manage agile projects. So you see what a business analyst is supposed to do on Jira when the organizations are using Jira, the role of a product owner and where a product owner would put their artifacts on Jira, and then we'll get a sense of what a Scrum Master may also do on Jira. So, but our focus will be on the first two, a BA and a product owner, since they have related roles and they are likely jobs that we want to focus on. Okay, so let me share my screen so you see how I get to Jira from scratch. So I'm going to open a new tab. I hope you can see it. And I'll just type jira.com. Now there's nothing like jira.com. Jira is a software made by a company called Atlassian or Atlassian. So it will redirect me to atlassian.com and to the Jira software. You can see the address, right? So Atlassian has several products. One of them is Confluence, which is a document manager, which is so a system where you can put your documents. Organizations that use Agile many times use Confluence to manage their artifacts, their requirements or business analysis information. So business analysis information in general. So it may be requirement or design artifacts. So artifacts in this case will include your models, right? So your models will be saved somewhere, anywhere that the people you want to have access to it can have access to it. So one of such tools that you can use to share your documents and make them available to only those who you want to have access to it will be Confluence, right? So we are not talking about Confluence or looking into Confluence today. What we'll be discussing is Jira. Yet I'll challenge you to play with Confluence yourself for your project so you can have it on your CV that you can use it. There's no big deal with this tool. It's just a tool to store documents like your Google Drive and share it with the people you want. So organizations use it to manage documents, files, and distribute these files. But it's made by the same company that makes Jira, that is Atlassian. And what that means is it integrates very well with Jira, maybe even better than other document management systems or file management systems. So back to our focus for today, Jira. The company that makes Jira makes several software. So we'll go to product so you can see that they make the Jira software, which is used to manage projects. They make Jira Service Management, which is another product that helps manage services like your customer service. So some people will say, oh, I've used Jira, I'm familiar with Jira. I used it to my company uses Jira. We manage tickets on Jira. But the Jira we are talking about in Agile is different, right? So we'll be talking about Jira software, which is used to develop IT products like software and hardware and data products, not Jira Service Management, which is used to keep track of customer requests or client requests and manage those requests. So you can open tickets and lay a complaint, and it will assign the ticket to the right person to handle it. Or some organizations that use ticket for development, where they have um, freelancers or consultants working for them, or even developers. Some organizations can use the service management part of Jira, this different product, to assign workload to those people as tickets. So they'll fix the tickets and their job is done. But we are looking at development, which is the Jira software. So Confluence is the software the other product I talked about for managing content, document, and files. Trello is a lightweight project management system that Atlassian bought. So it's like Jira, but lightweight. It's used to manage any type of project. So students use it to manage courses. Developers, small teams can use it to manage small things, right? Any type of project. And you see, they keep buying or building new products, right? So there's Atlas, there's Compass. This is the first time I've seen this, and there's still more. Now, all these are none of our business for now. And may never ever be our business, because the product we're interested in is their product for Agile. And that's the Jira software. Jira is available for free as long as you don't use any of their fancy plugins or add-ons, or as long as you don't select to use the commercial one. So Jira is available for free. The thing is, it's very difficult not to uh, mistakenly click on their commercial product, but it doesn't mean if you click on it, you'll be asked to pay. What they will do is they'll give you maybe trial period, 1 week, 2 weeks, and that will maybe lock you out or revert you to the free version if you don't pay them anything. So every of you will be able to register for a Jira account. So when it comes time for our project, we'll have to decide whether to add you to this Jira account that I'm going to be showing you, or you set out to create your own Jira account. So one person in the project team, because you'll be divided into teams, will create a Jira account and add the other people. Okay. So let me try to log in to this Jira. So I'll log in with Google. Okay, so I have this different products listed, right? So all the Jira products. So in this case, I'll choose Jira software, because that's the one that you'd use to manage Agile projects. If you notice, you see different things I've used even today on the Jira platform. So this is my Jira. I've been using it for a long time now. I use the free one, so I end up deleting stuff, adding stuff, right? Uh, so sometimes you would have maxed out or created so many projects on it that you'd have to kick some projects out. Right? So yours will not look like this. You won't have any projects. These are my projects that I have, for testing purposes. You won't have any of this, and some of them are actual projects. Yours will be blank. So you'd create a project. You go to project and you click create project. Okay. Now, there's also a create button where you can use to create Jira artifacts, or mainly for existing projects. Okay. So it's expecting that the artifact you want to create will fit into an existing project. Okay. So it's listing all the projects I have, and I can now create a Jira artifact to fit into those projects. So once we create our project, we can be using this create button to do anything we want inside. But for now, because I want to create a new project, I'll go to project and I'll click create project. So it's giving me, as you can see, software development, right? That's the focus. So it's giving me templates, project templates for a software development project. If I wanted product management, marketing, human resources, I'm sure the template will be different. Design projects, the templates will be different, right? So this is design, for example. So it's giving me, do I want to do web design process, asset management, asset creation, blank project, general service management for business teams. So for us, we're assuming a typical BA will be working in a Jira environment that is creating software. That software may be web-based, it doesn't matter, it may be window-based, or something you can install on your desktop, and you'll be using a Scrum framework. You'll be using Scrum. So these templates would suffice. They'll be enough. Right? So you'd use one of these. In our case, you'll be using Scrum. Okay. Now, Kanban is another way people visualize their project using Kanban boards. And what that just does is the components of your project, so it may be your requirements, your user stories, they will be represented as cards, and you can move them around as you are making progress. So you can move them through your workflow. So your Scrum usually has something that looks like a Kanban board already in it that would allow the developers move work around as they make progress. So we would use Scrum. We won't go and create a Kanban, just Kanban board kind of project. Rather, would use Scrum. So let me choose Scrum. So I'm using the Scrum template, and Jira calls the artifacts it calls them issues. So you can create 5 types of issues based on the template I'm using, Scrum, right? I'm using a template based on Scrum. So I can create any of 5 types of issues: an epic, a story, a bug, task, and subtask. So let me explain what this means. An epic is a way to group related stories. So an epic is a group of related stories. Related, as the word connotes, means it's subjective, right? It will depend on the organization and the BA and the project itself. So say we're developing something for different departments, and we want to do one department at a time. We can make departments as our epic and put all the stories for that department under that epic. So we're saying these stories are related because they belong to a particular department. Say it's a particular feature or a group of features. We want a new e-payment platform, right? So we're developing a system that will have different components, but one of them is online payment. So we can group all the features that will go into the online payment part under an epic. So the epic may be called online payment, right? And there would put all features, all our stories concerning online payments will be part of that epic. So in that system, there may be online registration. Maybe that's another epic. So every story concerning online registration will be under the other epic. There may be report generation. So that may be a different epic, and every story concerning report generation will fall into the other epic. So that's what an epic is, a way to group or categorize different stories. Then you see, story is exactly what it means, our user story. So that's another type of issue that Jira can create, stories. Then you have bugs. Bugs is what we call, or what programmers call, errors. Errors in their codes, wrong things, right? Things that have been written that is not working well, or things, essentially mistakes in code is what is called bugs. This mistake may come from the developer. So we have things like syntax errors. It may, and there are other types of errors, but it may also come from maybe packages used, components of the code, essentially. So when developers write code, some of the codes they would use, or some parts of their codes may not be written by them. So we may call that components. It may be that those codes already exist on the framework they are using, or it may be something they downloaded. And sometimes those codes may not be up to date, so they may not work well with their other codes. So those kinds of situations can cause errors. Those errors will be called bugs. Any error, in fact, that has to do with coding are called bugs. So it may be something the developer typed that he typed wrongly. Maybe he wanted to spell something and he spelled it wrongly in his code. And then the thing is not working. The program is not running because of that error. That will be a bug. So Jira allows you to also create issue types known as bugs. So you can keep a record of, okay, this part of the program is not working, or we are getting this type of error, and developers can fix it. So at the end of a sprint, when you're doing sprint review, maybe they are not able to deliver the increment because some things are not working. So you want to keep a record of all those things that are not working in Jira so that they can fix those things in the next sprint. Then you have tasks. BAs write stories, right? So BAs, we write stories. We are storytellers. We listen to stories in the name of requirements from business, and we write those stories and acceptance criteria. Developers break these stories down to tasks. So your one story may have several tasks under it. So developers will look at that story. You are telling them a user needs to do this. You don't care how they implement it. You're just saying, this is what a user needs to do. And this is what we need to see, or this is how we want it to work for us to accept it. The developers will now take that story and break it down into things they need to do, they need to implement. So if you have a story about putting products in shopping carts, number one, developers know they have to get the picture of the cart, that icon. They have to be able to get it. So it may mean they have to design it themselves, or get something online, maybe a stock cart picture. They need to write codes to help you select a product and add that product to a list. They need to write codes to store the items in the list. They need to write codes to update a database. They need to write codes to allow you be able to delete the item from the list. They need to write code to do calculations to update the total cost, right? The price as you are making changes. You need to write codes to update the number of product as you are making changes. As you are adding product, the number of product in your shopping cart is increasing or reducing if you are removing product. So these are the different tasks they need to do, and many other tasks that may not even be very obvious to us. So they will take your story and break those stories down to these tasks. Mainly Jira would contain stories and plenty tasks. So the people that mainly use Jira are your developers to manage their tasks. So tasks may have subtasks. So some tasks also have children, and that's what subtasks represent. So that's another issue type. So Jira allows you create any of these types of issues. Then there's also a workflow to monitor the progress of work in your project. In this template, it's showing 3 levels. So you have tasks that are to do, that means tasks you haven't started, tasks that are in progress, and tasks that are done. Now, different strokes for different folks. In some organizations, they may have even more layers, more levels than this. So they may have tasks under review and so on. And you would see that we can customize the workflow. So I'm going to use this template. So here, I've chosen to use the Scrum template that I've been provided. Now, I'm giving the option to select a team managed project or a company managed project. A company managed project will work for environments where the company has created some parameters already, and they'll be managing which projects are created on their Jira platform and so on and so forth. For us, we don't have it configured as a company system. So it's a team that's going to be managing this. So we'd use team. Now, let me mention as we get to this page, the product details or project details page, that as a BA, you may get to your organization and they would already have their Jira platform set up. So you may never ever see all these pages that I'm showing you. You may never ever see those pages. The Scrum Master or whoever has configured the whole thing would have configured it. All you'll be seeing will be the pages where there is work, maybe pages for you to load your stories if your company is using just Jira, or pages for you to see what the developers are doing as tasks. And many times their tasks don't really concern you per se. Right? Yours is to write story, theirs is to write tasks from your stories. So except they have questions, they may put their questions on Jira for you to respond to. So you may never ever see all these pages I'm showing you. And that's what's going to be common for most of you. You may not see it. So after this course, you may never see any of these pages where you are saying create project. The project will already be created. You will just see work, and you see where you can enter your user stories and acceptance criteria. So for this project, I'm just going to call the name of our project TNT Amazon, TechNest Amazon, right? And immediately Jira generates a key for me. So it's abbreviating the name I'm using here. It's abbreviating it because it's going to code all the epics or user stories I create using this key. Now, So every user story I write, every artifact I create, task and everything will be coded using this key, maybe TA101, TA102. Like we mentioned, all your requirements have to have a unique identifier. So it's going to use this key to generate unique identifiers for all my requirements and all my artifacts on Jira. Okay. Now I have an option to connect a repository here if I need to. So if I have files, documents on Confluence or Google Drive or SharePoint, I can click here to connect them. So these documents will be available. Say if I had created models, like a process model, different use case diagrams, different context diagrams, and all those beautiful artifacts that we can create, then I can connect, and I've stored all of them in a repository, then I can connect that those files. I can connect that repository to my Jira board here, to my Jira platform now while I'm creating the project, so that when I start creating maybe the user stories, I can just start picking those files. I'll be able to see the files in my repository or in my file manager or document manager and be adding the files. So I can add the right image to my user story. I can add the right model to my user story, so that as the developers are looking at the user story, if I want them to see models, they can see models too. Now, is that how things would typically be done? Not necessarily so. Many people may never ever add any models or anything, but there are instances, depending on the project you are working on, where there may be other things you want to share. Like if your project has data, maybe the data can be stored on uh, maybe Confluence or Google Drive or SharePoint, right? So maybe you have one of those repositories where you can store your data. You may want to make the data available with the story, right? So I don't have any business with this for now, so I'm going to skip that and just go to create my project. So it's creating my project. My project has been created. So I now have a Jira project. Now, so for many of you, this is my project board, the TNT Amazon. So it's coded as TA based on the key, right? So, and I have my project, TNT Amazon. So for many of you, I wrote it in full so I can always remember what the project is about, although the name is here, right? I can see it here, but I don't want the code to be displayed. Now, many of you, all this is not your business. You can't even go on your company's Jira board and change any name or anything per se, right? Because you won't be responsible for any of this, right? Depending on the organization you end up working for and how they do things. But very likely you won't be responsible for any of this. All the things I've shown you so far, you may not even ever be involved in that. What what you would see though would be a board like this. So this is my Jira board. And in your Jira board, you'd find different tasks and their progresses. So this is empty for now. So you may never ever see an empty Jira board. So enjoy it while it lasts. So this is empty for now. So you'd see when we go to our backlog, which we have talked about, we said your user stories or your features and the things that the requirements essentially that you need to produce the product you want to create will be in your product backlog. So that is what backlog means here. This is your product backlog. So here, you see my backlog is empty. I'm supposed to create all my backlog items, my PBIs, product backlog items. So I'm supposed to create all the backlog items here. So let's start creating backlog items. Now, what will be in your backlog? It will be your user stories. Now, let's create our first user story. Now, so you see this symbol, this icon here is used by Jira to represent story. Jira considers stories, bugs, tasks, subtasks, epics. It considers all of them to be issues. So it calls them issue. If you go to DevOps, you have a different name for it. Right? But for Jira, it calls them issue. DevOps, by the way, is another project management system like Jira that you can use to create and manage your projects. So everything you can do on Jira, basically, you should be able to do on DevOps. Okay. So before creating my stories, I would want to create epics. So let me enable an epic panel. So I want to create epics. Now I'm doing all these and I'm able to do all this because I'm the one creating this Jira project from scratch. Yours would maybe most likely have already been created for you by your company, so you won't need to do all this. Right? So you would only work with what they have. So if they don't have epics, you can't go on, which is very, very unlikely anyways that they won't have epics, but they will have defined their epics and you will only be adding stories. Now this is empty, so I'll create my epics. I may call the epic shopping cart system. Or let's call it cart management system. So that's one epic. I'll create another epic. I'll call it product management system. Let me see. What other epic can I create? I may create another epic. I'll call it payment management. So people may call their epic whatever they like, right? Depending on the product they are creating and the organization and the way the product manager, product owner. So this is a product owner's job, depending on how they are thinking and seeing things. I'm calling this cart management system. It may not be a system, it may be a module. So if I wanted to call it cart management module, which is module just means a portion of your system, right? A portion of your system that to a large extent can stand alone, can work on its own, but it's a part of your system. It's not the whole system. So the entire thing may be called a system and you have modules, right? Fractions, portions of your system that can do different things and can stand alone. So they may say, oh, for this, our Amazon, maybe the whole project is about an Amazon online selling system. They may say, okay, we have a cart management module, a product management module, a payment management module, or whatever, right? So anything you want, it's a free world, as long as it makes sense to the people in the organization, right? So if I wanted to change that, I can go to, I have clicked on the epic, I can go to view details and it will bring up the details in this corner. Yes, where I can now edit what I've written. I can change this to module. Okay, so we have that. I can change the others too, but I'll leave them for now. So let me do something else just to show you the little things you can do with Jira to manage your project. So let me go to the product management system, this epic, the product management epic. I can change the color here, maybe to orange, and change the payment one. So I'll change this payment one to let's see, what other color? Maybe green, right? green for money. So we have these different colors, and now we have created epics, but epics are just containers that help us group our stories. So epics in and of themselves are useless. They are not they are not important. They are not anything, except they tell us that this group of stories we want to do them, right? This group of stories are related, and maybe we need to do them together to get the full effect, to get a set of maybe increments that can deliver a minimum viable product, or whatever it is we want in terms of how we have broken down our product. But even if you have the best epic, if they don't have stories, then they are useless. They are not meaningful. So what we want, what we need in Jira, and the bedrock of our agile methodology, is the story. So we now need to go create stories. Let me minimize these epics and create stories. So I'll just create some stories, random stories. They may be meaningless. They may not have any significant content. So I'll just create a few with meaning, maybe just one, to save our time. So again, Jira calls everything that you can create in it an issue. So I'm just going to use create issue. And by default, my default issue is a story, because again, you're a BA, so all your issues are stories. That's the expectation. But if you wanted, you can click on this chevron here and switch it to a task or a bug. Now it's abnormal for a BA to be creating tasks or bugs. Okay, it would be unusual, but again, depending on the environment you're working in, I don't see the environment where a BA will create a task. That's something for developers to do. If you have a testing team, which is the normal thing, they are the ones that would detect bugs and create bugs and report the bugs to. So they are using Jira to report the bugs to you, the BA, and especially the developers, so that the developers can fix those bugs. So your testing teams will usually be the ones to create bugs. The developers can also identify bugs and so create bugs. You would mainly deal with stories. So let's see how I would create our story. So I already have this. So I will now think of a summary for my story. Let's say I wanted to create a story to add things to cart. So I'll say cart. Maybe I may say add stuff to cart. So that's the summary of my story. Once I can, so it automatically assign this to an Epic payment management system. That's wrong. That's not where I want that to go. But maybe looked at the name. I guess AI has gotten into Jira's art too. So it's looking at the title of what I have, and it's figuring out that it has something to do with payment. That's interesting, but that's not where I want it to go. So I will switch that. But you can see that if I have, this is my product backlog, all the stories I'm creating here go into my product backlog. So this is my product backlog. If I have 500 stories, let's assume, by color coding it this way, I can see which ones are purple, which means those are the ones that will that fall under payment. I can see which ones are green, and so on. There's something funny here. This is supposed to be green, right? Maybe it hasn't updated. Anyways, so I put this under cart management model, add stuff to cart. So I can create under, I haven't created stories. I'm just putting their titles there. Delete stuff from cart. So I haven't created any, I'm just putting their titles, the titles of my story. So I created this, delete stuff from cart. It's not showing. So this is mainly maybe technical Jira stuff is supposed to load. So I'm sure it's somewhere. Maybe if I refresh, it will come up. Okay, it still says I have one issue here. So, but it's definitely somewhere. Let's recreate it. Delete stuff. Okay, so this went in now, and the color has corrected itself. Okay, so let's move this back to cart, then to cart management module. Then let's see what else can we. What other story? So I haven't. I'm just putting the titles of my story here now. Right. And this is my product backlog. Is it named backlog? This is my product backlog. I haven't created a sprint. I haven't done any of those. So let's just create some more funny stories. So you see, it's giving my story a unique identifier. This is 4, this is 5. So let me create. So delete stuff. What else? Add out of stock stuff. So add out of stock stuff. I'll change that to cart too. Say pay for stuff. So that should be payment. Let's see if it will detect it. Okay, good. I'll say add product to store. Say add sellers to store. Add credit cards to customer. So I'm just creating different titles. Now I can add this to different. So pay for stuff is in the right place. Let's leave that alone. Um, add product to store should be in product management. So let's move that. That's good. Add seller to store should be in product management. What happened here? Okay. So okay. So we have had product to store, add pay for stuff. Pay for stuff should be in payment. So everything is correct. Now, the reason why anything I put in product is not showing is because product is not highlighted here. So now that it's highlighted, it will show. So I can remove, click on this and see only what belongs to an epic. Right. So if I want to see only what belongs to product management, I can see just the stories for product management. Okay, so we have all this. Now, let's look at how we would add our story. So these are just the titles of the story. I just want to go to cart management system and click on the add stuff to cart. So I click on this so that the So I get this pane, this window pane where all the parameters, all the attributes of this story would show. So I can now, for example, assign the story to one of the developers. So let's say Sean is the developer. That means I've assigned it to this person, and they are responsible for developing the story. So if there's somebody that is managing the team, the development team that who is supposed to receive reports about progress of the story, I'll put them here. Right. So put Kara here. Then if there is a label for my story, so something to help me further understand or categorize story, I can put here. So if I already know the sprint, remember these stories will be, all the stories in my product backlog will be divided into sprints, will be done in sprints. So if I already know the sprint that this story will be carried out or implemented, I can put it in that sprint. So that would usually be after I'd created sprints, but I haven't created any sprint. So I will be seeing sprint of other projects that I've done, right? So see, there's sprint one by default, which is what it assumes I'm working on. So let's leave that. Then you have story points. And I explained what story points are in the last class. I said story points are used to estimate the complexity of a story. Right. So instead of story points, you can configure your Jira board to show hours, to show time. So because at the end of the day, what matters, why you're estimating complexities, because you want to know how long a particular story will take to execute. So you can know how many stories you can do in your sprint. Right. So you can know how many stories you can do in your sprint. Now, like I mentioned to you, for story points, some organizations use t-shirt sizes, so small, medium, large, extra large, extra large, all those kind of things. Some organizations use the Fibonacci sequence, where 1, 2, 3, 5, 7, blah, blah, blah. And they cap it at a certain number, where the highest number will mean that story is very complex, the most complex it can be, and then the lowest would mean not complex at all, right? So for t-shirt sizes, too small will mean the story is very small, you don't require much time, and large will mean, or extra large, whatever they want to stop at, will mean the story is super complex. So they just use these variables to differentiate the complexity, to compare stories based on complexity, to know that one story is more complex than another. Now, organizations that have already started carrying out sprints, that have already started doing sprints, would know their capacity. They will know how many story points they can do in a sprint. At least they'll have an idea. So because it's an estimate, so they'll know how many story points they can do in a sprint, or how many they know how many hours they can work in a sprint anyways, right? So if it's 2 weeks, it will be 40 hours times 2, which is 80 hours, right? 5-hour work weeks. 5-day work weeks, 8-hour days. So it's 40 hours. So if they were using hours rather than point estimates, you can look at a story and the developers will agree on how many hours it will take. Now, this is a good place to talk about how developers determine story point, or how a Scrum Master, who is the one coordinating this whole thing, will arrive at story points. So in a sprint planning meeting, you have your developers you are the product owner. You have come with all these stories. So let me just highlight all our stories, all our epics, so we can see all our stories. We have about, I think, 7 stories. So we have 7 stories in our product backlog. So you are the product owner. You have come with all these stories. Now you start picking them one at a time. Add stuff to cart. Developers, the Scrum Master will ask, how long do you think this would take to implement? Or what is the story point? So depending on what your organization is using, if it's time, if it's story points. So what is the story point for this particular user story? So you would click on the story. The details of the story would already be available. In this case, I've not put any description in the story. So this is where you are supposed to type, where you see description, is where you are supposed to type your user story. So you can put the feature name if you want. Usually organizations will have a template with the things they want you to fill already in the description. So you will just be filling the stuff. So let's assume this organization or just has user story and acceptance criteria. Right. So you can come here and this is where you would put your user story. So as a developer, so if you were writing a technical story, you write it from the developer's perspective, right? So as a developer, I want to create, of course, we have been saying as a customer or as a user, I want to put things in cart. I'm just giving you another flavor of it that you can actually write it from the developer's perspective. I want to create a shopping cart so customers can put items they want to buy for review and subsequent purchase. So you have something like this. That's my user story. So I have my story here. Then I can add the acceptance criteria, given that the okay. So given that the customer is on Amazon.com and the customer is logged in. When so I have something like this. Let's say when. This is how I would write it, right? When customer selects a product and drags the product into shopping then the shopping cart should be updated with the product name, the product price, and the now so when the customer selects a product and drags the product, so you may say and enters and adds the product instead of drags and adds the product to the shopping cart. Right. the product, then the shopping cart should be. So I would do something like this, especially when I have several ads. If it's me, just to right. There's nothing wrong with writing it as one sentence, which is what it is. But me, I'm just extra like that. So I do giving that the customer when the customer selects a product and adds the product to a shopping cart. And I'll do this because in case I want to put and, right? You say and, right, the customer maybe something else. What else can the customer do to product? And the customer, uh, so I can just have my and here underneath if I want, right? So my user story is up, my acceptance criteria is down under it, right? So if I have different scenarios, this is where I'll put my scenario 1, right? So this is my scenario 1. Right. So if I have another scenario, I'll put it under scenario 2. Given that the customer is not logged in, when the customer selects a product, then what should happen, right? Stuff like that. So this is where you put your user story and acceptance criteria in Jira. Then you save it. So you have your WYSIWYG editor, meaning you can edit just like Microsoft Word and all that. So you can italicize. You may not want to use bold like me. You may say you prefer to italicize. And at the same time, you may not even want to separate your giving when then the way I'm doing, right? All that is fine. Whatever works for you. You look at how the other BAs in your organization are doing it. And if you are the only BA, then you can do whatever you like and whatever you do becomes the standard, right? So you do it however you want to do it, but you get the gist. So this is where your user story and acceptance criteria will go to, right? And if you have multiple scenarios, then the scenarios will be, so everything goes in here and you save. So you have your sprint. If there's a sprint already, you have story estimate, right? So you're supposed to do all this before your sprint starts. So this is the day of sprint planning. That's when you do all this. So let's add a story point estimate, let's say 8, whatever that means to us. So what 8 means to one organization may not exactly be what 8 means to another organization. Right? So usually there'll be a table where all these things would have been explained. This is more of the Scrum Masters thing where they'll say, okay, if you're using Fibonacci sequence, maybe we can only undo 40 story points per sprint. So if you say these story points will be 8, that means we still have like 5 story points like this that we can add to our sprint. So anyways, 5 user stories such as this that we can add to our sprint. Since this is 8 and 8 times 5 is 40 and we can undo 40. So as people work on this story, they can comment here. So they can leave comments here for you, for different developers. So they will add whoever it is they are talking to, right? So depending on the people assigned to this story, because you can assign more than one person. I don't know if that has changed. Yeah, so ideally, based on our business analysis, we know that one person should be responsible. So that is still the case. But in some instances, your story may have subtasks, right? So you may have subtasks, and those subtask, or you may even have several tasks on that one story. Those tasks may be assigned to different people. So you may find different people commenting here. Anything that doesn't concern you doesn't concern you. If developers are talking to themselves, you just watch and enjoy the show. But when they add you, that means they have a business question for you to address, and you need to step in here and address it here in Jira. Once they add you, you get an email usually that not usually, definitely you get an email that so story, so Jira, whatever, there's something for you. So once you click, it will come to wherever they have called you, and you have to respond. So they may have a question about acceptance criteria, how a product should behave, which is usually the thing, right? You remember, we're doing behavior driven development. So, and that's how you'd use Jira. Now, still on story points, I mentioned that they may use Fibonacci. How do developers, since they are the ones who drive, who determine the amount of resource, the complexity of stories, and the amount of time it will take to implement a story? How do developers come up with story points? Now, some organizations still do this, and some don't anymore. What people used to do is, it's possible to have a very lazy developer, and you give him a story like this, and he will say, this story will take 10 working days to do. And that's 2 weeks already. That's an entire sprint, just this one story. And so to prevent that, and it's also possible to have 5 developers or 3 developers, and all of them will connive rather than stressing themselves. They will agree that, let's tell them that this story takes long so that we don't have to work as much. So the developers may plan and say, okay, this story is going to be tough and it will take 5 working days. So each story is taking 1 week. That means you can only do 2 stories in one sprint. Now, how organizations were able to work around that is using tools like what is called Planet Poker. Planet Poker. Let me see if I can pull up a Planet Poker. Planet Poker platform, because many times they'll want you to pay, but I've used some that are free. Let me see if I can find one. Now, many organizations or some organizations don't use this anymore. It's just unnecessary. There's more trust now amongst organizations. But you see, from the screen, you can already see, you see the numbers you see. These numbers represent complexity. It usually follows like this is most likely a Fibonacci sequence, right? So 0 will mean the task is not complex at all, half maybe somewhat complex, and so on and so on forward to 100, which is the most complex. So you would have all your developers sign on to these two. So you would already have these two. The Scrum Master will send a link. Right. We'll send a link there. I'm sure there's a free version. I've used this on a project extensively before, but not this part. I don't think I used this paid one. I think I used the free one. I can't remember. Anyways, let's see if I. So you assign this different, what is it called now? You assign, the Scrum Master generates a link, right? Once the poker game starts, is for planning, and sends the link to the different developers who hopefully are located in different places. So once the Scrum Master sends the link, we'll now ask them, okay, so you have looked at this story. What is the story point? So independently, they are supposed to enter a value, usually not enter. The values will already be there, like you can see on the board. Let me see if I can pull that up still on the Planet Poker. Yeah. So the values will already be there and they're supposed to. So, yeah. So these values will pop up and they're supposed to choose one. Right. And there will be a short period of time, maybe 2 minutes, for them to choose so that they can communicate and plan. But let's don't deceive ourselves. If the developers are, they are G's, if they are G's, they can plan outside the old thing, but usually that is not the case, right? But They can plan outside the whole thing and just be overestimating stories so that they don't have to work as much. But that's what this planning poker was for. So they will choose a number. So if you have 5 developers and 3 of them say, or 4 of them say, this task is only going to take 3 story points, and one of them says 40, you turn to the person that said 40 and say, Auntie, sorry. How come you think this task could take 40 when everyone else is saying it's a tiny task that we can do in 3 story points? Right? So obviously majority carries the vote, and you try to negotiate. As Scrum Master will try to negotiate to make sure that they are not overestimating any task and they are not underestimating it. Right? So that's how Planet Poker works. It was just a tool used to help people determine complexity of task without bias. Nowadays, really, the Scrum Master and the product owner will just ask the development lead or whoever is in charge of development or the developers themselves and say, what do you think? How long will this take? And we'll trust them that they won't lie, right? And they'll tell you, this will take 3 story points. This will take 5. Yeah, and you trust that they won't lie because they are not the only ones there. Their bosses are there, and their bosses too. They are supposed to know, have an idea how long these things would take. So if you're overestimating, your boss will know and is looking at you with a funny eye, right? So things are changing, but some organizations still use tools like Planet Poker to what is it called? Estimate story points. So, like I've said, Planet Poker just allows people choose story points independently. It can also be time, right? So, if your Planet Poker tool allows you to show different times, people can choose a time, and you just check sort of voting. They are voting for a time, and you check what majority is choosing. And if there is so much discrepancy, maybe so much difference, that may mean that maybe some people don't understand the task. And you would now ask them as the Scrum Master. So now I'm stepping into what a Scrum Master will do. The Scrum Master will ask the people that chose high numbers, why do you think this task is 40? What do you think the task is about? So they can explain. And when they explain, you may find that they are overthinking things. Maybe they are assuming things that the story does not require of them. And with that information, you can help them see why the task should have a lower story point, or the story should have a lower story point. So that's how story points come about. But nowadays, they just have a simple meeting and they ask developers, what's the story point? We have 40 for this sprint, or we have 150 for this epic, right? For the entire epic, which will have several sprints. So what's the story point for this? And they tell you, and you put it in. Okay, so we have our backlog, we have our user stories, right? In the backlog, let's assume we have filled all this with user stories and acceptance criteria, right? Then, is this not where I put the, okay, yeah, it's there. Okay, so we have all this, we have story points, we have it assigned. Interestingly, this person will get a notification now that I assigned a task to them on Jira. So the next step is to plan your sprint, right? That's what we're already doing through the story points. So if we already know the story points, like this one is assigned to this person and it has its own story point, we can now start pulling these stories into the sprint backlog. So you see this place, this is the sprint backlog. So we'll pull the stories based on the number of story points we know this sprint can take. We'll pull the stories into the sprint backlog. So let's assume this sprint can take 2 stories or 3 stories. We pull them. into the sprint backlog. Now, because we've organized them into epics, we can see the color, right? So we're pulling purple stories, right? And we know they're about the same thing, the cart management module. So we have these stories. Yeah. If these stories meet our requirements in terms of the number of story points, right? The story points are intact. We assign them to different people, we assign them to people, then we can start our sprint. So this becomes our sprint one, start sprint. So when you click start sprint, it's supposed to pop up and tell you to choose a start date and end date. So by default, you see it's showing 2 weeks. So it assumes you're starting your sprint today, which is a Monday. Your sprint will last for 2 weeks. You can change it to 1 week, to 4 weeks, right? So between 1 and 4 weeks, or a custom date if you want to change it to a waterfall approach for whatever reason. Or if you, for some reason, all these default numbers don't work for you, right? So you can change it. So if you put 2 weeks, it automatically already knows the end date. But if you say custom, then you can put an end date you want, and you can put the goal of the sprint here. So this is where you'd ideally tell us what you want the increment to be. Uh, your definition of done can go here, right, into this box, and that's it. And you start your sprint. And once you start your sprint, life has started. So let's start this sprint just for the fun of it and see. So started our sprint. So that's our sprint backlog. It's taking us now to the board, our Jira board. We'll be able to see can you see? We can see our stories. They are all in to do. So the developers will start picking these stories one at a time. Now, ideally, developers will ideally not deal directly with stories. They will deal with tasks. So usually before we start our sprint, the developers are supposed to have looked at these tasks, these stories, and created tasks from them during sprint planning. So let's create some tasks. So I'll change this to a task instead of a story, call it task, and I'll say do shopping cart icon. I'll create another task, do cart dashboard. Do shopping cart window. Right, so I'm just creating random tasks. Now, these tasks will be created by developers, not the BA, except the BA is working for the developers, right? So you may have that kind of technical BA that works for developers. You can see that it has similar parameters. So story points, the task can be assigned to people. But the key thing here is, you see, the task is not assigned to any epic. The task is, everybody can see it, different other things you can do. But what I want to do here is add a parent to the task. So I'll add this task to a user story. Right. So these are epics. Let's kick that out. I don't want to add it to an epic. So let's do that now. Let's go to this fellow, see if I can get the description. Since it's already in a sprint, then add a child. Yeah, that's not going to be easy because it's already in a, what's it called now? In a sprint, right? So let me add it to, because you are not supposed to add anything to something. Once a sprint starts, you're not supposed to add or remove anything from the sprint, right? sprint is we have agreed this is the amount of work we can do in 2 weeks. Once you click start, it has started. Life has gone, So you're not supposed to disturb them. You're not supposed to add anything to what the developers are already working on. So you're supposed to have done your task things and added all those before you click start on the sprint. So, but this one that we haven't done anything, let me come here and say, okay, I want to add, let's do cart. So I want to choose an existing issue. Okay, so I want to add my tasks to a story. Let me see if it will come up. Still not showing me existing issues. Interesting. Okay. Okay, let's see if it will allow me create. I can create now. Okay, so I can add my tasks directly here. Child issue. Let's see. Which one? Do shopping. Okay, so I can add my child issue here. It's not listing the already created tasks for me to add automatically. So it's not allowing me choose, but that's fine. There's a way around that. So instead of creating my issues, I can add my children or child task. Yeah. So a developer normally will now add their tasks under each story, right? So if there are tasks they want to do. Now, let me close this and see. There may be, if you move a story, let's say you decide you want to move a story back, it's usually going to think the story has been completed. Yep. Sprint scope will be affected. You see the pop-up. Can you all see the pop-up? Can you see the message?
Yes.
Okay. So I'm trying to move a story from an ongoing sprint back into the backlog. Right? And it's saying the scope will be affected, right? Because again, this is work people have decided to do. They have started the sprint, nothing is supposed to change, and you are taking away a story. So let's say I confirm. Now, this is not supposed to happen in a typical project. Now, if you, in fact, some of these things have been improved. If you delete a story, let me look for a story. do card. Let's do this credit card one. You're about to permanently, it removes the story completely from your backlog, right? It removes the story completely in such a way that you may not be able to recover it. Now, let's go to the board. Now that we added some. So here we still see stories in our board. You can change this. This should be, you can change this to only show tasks, which will be the normal normal view, right? Which will be the normal thing when you have developers working on tasks. So the developers will be the ones responsible for moving the tasks themselves. So all the tasks that you have will be listed here, right? And developers will move the tasks along your workflow as they make progress. Okay. Any question? Mhm. Yeah. In some cases, you can automate your workflow, which is mainly what this is for. So sort of using something like a process map, right? To automate, you can design the way your workflow to go, you want your workflow to go, and create rules around your workflow. This is advanced. I don't even think many people use this in terms of how they use Jira. Many people don't bother about this at all, but it's worth showing you. So you can add, we have these three. Let me see. Let me go back to the board. No, leave. Let me go back to the board and show you. So you can add new parts to your workflow. Maybe you want under review before done. You can have something like this, so that as your stories are being executed, you can move them right through the workflow, depending on how your organization operates. So, for example, some organizations after in progress, it will go to under review or maybe under testing or something, right? Before it can ever come to done. Now, if you say done, supposed to update this entire epic in the backlog. And so you see, it has canceled this one out. It's done. Done. Now, and it's already showing you how much of cart management module is done, right? So let's go back to the board. So again, developers will be responsible. Yours is to get the user stories into Jira. For some organizations, you won't even use Jira at all. You write your user story somewhere else, and it will, if they are using Jira, it will post it from that place to Jira. So yours is just to write your user story. It will post from that tool to Jira, and developers will now take it from Jira and be doing their stuff. So the only time you would be involved with Jira is if they have questions, right? So some organizations use tools like Haha and so on. Okay. So you can see the number of days left. So it's going to be timing, and every day this will be updated. So it's counting only work days, of course, to be updated. So how many days left in this sprint, right? And after this sprint, you have another sprint planning meeting and you create sprint 2. It's possible to create your sprint depending on how you have configured your Jira. You can create your sprint already where you have your sprint 2, sprint 3, sprint 4, and you can assign all your stories to different sprints already. So everything will just be flowing. After sprint 1, it automatically starts sprint 2 if you want it that way. Okay, so I just switch the view so that it will show tasks rather than Epic. I think Epic is with the default, right? So to show tasks the way developers would see it, right? So developers will be moving tasks, the tasks that they created. And so a user story may have 5 tasks, may have 10 tasks. Some other user stories may have 4 tasks, and they'll continue to move tasks around as they do them, right? And so you'll just be seeing stuff like this on your in the backlog. You'll be seeing stuff like this, right? So quantity of progress being made if you are using Epic. Now, as a BA, though, all this, if you are a BA in an environment where there's a different product owner and you are just in between, right, representing business, all these things would actually like checking the progress of task and all that. They are none of your business. They are the product owner's business. And Scrum Master, the Scrum Master is the one that daily is monitoring progress of task. The product owner is interested because it's his product. So at the end of the sprint review, you want to see that they are actually delivering on all the things in the what is it called, the sprint backlog. So he or she may be interested in monitoring once in a while, coming to see if they are really making progress. But it's the Scrum Master's job to make sure they are making progress, to notify the product owner if there's any issue, if there's anything stopping them from making progress. Right? So it's the Scrum Master's job to talk to the developers every day. One of the things I mentioned earlier on when I was talking about Scrum Masters, not today, but in a previous lecture, was that Scrum Master is like the DJ. The Scrum Master does not need to know what story you have written in Add Stuff to Cart or anything. What the Scrum Master does every day during Scrum meetings is to look at this board, is to look at the board. And see the tasks and say, so you will see this is assigned to, right? This will be assigned to someone else. So the Scrum Master's job in a daily Scrum meeting is to call, who is Sean? No, he won't say who is Sean. He's supposed to know everybody. So we say, Sean, so any update on TA-4? You see, he doesn't know what's in TA-4 and he doesn't care. And people will assume he knows or she knows, but it's none of his business. He is not or she is not interested in the details of whatever it is they are doing. Theirs is just, is this thing moving? I just want this thing to move. And if it's not moving, what is delaying? So say, Sean, developer Sean, you can see you are responsible for this, right? So any update? Any update on TA4? You say, well, yes, I've developed this. I'm almost done. Scrum Master will pretend as if he's interested in all those stories. I'm almost done. I've developed this. And okay, so any blocker, yes, I need to talk to developer Timothy, right, to work out something. There's this configuration issue. So, okay, so let's take that offline. So I'll set up a meeting after this Scrum meeting for you and developer Timothy. Developer Timothy, can we meet? Yes. So we'll set that out. We'll sort that out offline. And the Scrum Master sets up a meeting for Sean and Timothy to meet and resolve whatever is delaying this. All the Scrum Master is interested in is these things have to be moving. That's his own job, to make sure these things are moving. Right. Now, the people that are interested in what are in these things are the product owner and Scrum Master. The product owner and business analyst. The product and the product owner may be the business analyst. We know that. The business analyst is not necessarily interested in the tasks. It's none of his business, except he's doing traceability, right? He's doing tracing where he wants to know if these tasks align with the user story or if they are doing what they are not supposed to be doing. But besides that, the business analyst is not interested in details of the task. Product owner is not interested in the details of the task, because you may look inside here and see what you don't want to see. You may see code, right? They may put some code, import Java dot whatever. They may write some code samples here for themselves, the developers, right, in their task, and that's not your business, right? So the what's it called? BAs don't even look into the task. They have written user stories. If developers have questions, they'll come to ask them. Okay, so that's a good point to stop. Now, there are workarounds for some things. Like there are some things that if you don't successfully do somewhere, you can do in another place, and so on. So that will come from playing around with Jira some more. All right. So here, for example, even on this board, I can change the parent of this. What's it called? Of this particular task, or this particular story, rather, is a story. So I can change the parent of this story right here. So there are some things that maybe you can do in the backlog. You may be able to do some other things on the board and so on. Okay. Questions? Now, some organizations use Slack, and some organizations are some teams are so adept at using Slack that they can use Slack to change the status of their project. So these are project statuses for your workflow. They can use Slack to change the status of their task or stories or whatever it is they want to change, their issues, their Jira issues, just by maybe. So Jira will be configured with Slack in such a way that just sending a message or doing something will move your task to another status. Now, again, these are, of course, those special edge cases. They are not what everyone does, right? So, but if you find yourself in those types of environments, it doesn't make anything, it doesn't change anything, it doesn't make anything different. You just learn how to do what you're doing. You are still doing the same thing. You are still moving your task. Again, you are not a developer, so you won't even be moving tasks in the first instance. So it's for developers. They're the ones that like techie, geeky stuff. So they are the ones that will have to figure that one out. So you would not need to move anything on you're on the board. You won't need to move anything anywhere. Okay, so you're not responsible for moving anything. You won't need to move anything anywhere. Developers are the ones that will be moving tasks around the workflow. Okay, so this is a good point to stop for today. Any question?